It's all your fault for having a wedding with a woman like that when I'm around. I didn't like it, so I just ruined it. I woke up in the hospital I was taken to, hearing my husband and best friend talking. I remember, in the middle of my long-awaited wedding, everything suddenly went black. As I continued to listen to their conversation, they started discussing something shocking. Sleeping pills. It turned out they were having an affair, and my best friend had added sleeping pills to my meal to sabotage the wedding. Knowing the truth, I decided to take revenge on them in my dazed state. My name is Michelle. I'm a stay-at-home mom living with my husband Tom and our son Michael. I've always had a complex about one thing. That we never had a wedding. 3 years ago, while I was pregnant with our child, Tom, who I was dating at the time, said, "The order is a bit reversed, but..." and proposed to me. I was over the moon about both the pregnancy and the proposal. However, my parents were strongly opposed. Even during the family gatherings, both families maintained their opposition. A shotgun wedding is out of the question. In response to my parents saying that, Tom's parents always seemed apologetic. And they assured me, no matter what decision you make, we'll make sure to take responsibility. Having an abortion wasn't an option for me, so I went against my parents' wishes and married Tom. At that time, we wanted a wedding but decided against it, considering the childbirth expenses. Now, almost 3 years after our son's birth, we still haven't had a wedding. It always bothered me. To someone like me, my husband finally said, "Let's have a wedding on Christmas." The reason being, I was gonna return to work at a hotel next spring, and our son was gonna start attending daycare. Knowing we'd be busier then, my husband felt we should have the wedding before that. Of course, I immediately agreed. I was so happy. Especially since my husband had been going out more often recently for drinks or other events, and I had started wondering, does he find it boring to be with me, or have I gone from being his lover and wife to just a mom? But it seems those worries were unfounded. The complex I had felt for so long vanished, and the recent concerns about Tom also seemed resolved. Looking back, I realize I was on cloud 9. The day after my husband's suggestion, I began planning the guest list. I have 4 close friends. I've been friends with them since high school, and even through college and starting our careers, we've remained tight-knit. Laura is a hardworking lawyer, Nancy is a working mom of 4-year-old twins, Rachel is currently expecting, and Isabel works at the same company as her husband. Though each of us is in a different stage in life, we regularly meet up for meals and trips, always staying in touch. I wanted to hand out wedding invitations to these 4 besties in person, so I decided to organize a lunch gathering. Congrats on the wedding. That sounds weird, right? Happy wedding, Michelle. Thanks for the invite. Rachel, the pregnant one, exclaimed. Thanks. Tom was like, let's have a wedding. I was so happy. But Rachel, make sure you don't overdo it, okay? You gotta take care of yourself. I said, only to be interrupted by Nancy, a mother of 2. No worries. I was working full-time when I was in her shoes. A wedding is a piece of cake. I had a tough time even with just 1 kid. Everyone's different, so really Rachel, don't push yourself. While we were discussing, Laura, the lawyer, playfully pinched my right shoulder. Hey! Don't flaunt your happiness like that. It's hard for Isabel and me to join the conversation. Right, Isabel? Isabel, looking a bit distracted, responded, huh? Oh, yeah. Seriously, don't show off. I observed Isabel and felt something was off. She seemed less lively than usual. Isabel was usually the lively one, often considered the cute youngest of our group of 4. So, her being unusually silent was definitely off. I wondered if the topics we were discussing were unsettling for Isabel, who was still single, or if they were subjects she'd rather we not touch upon. I chose not to delve deeper into it. On the day of my wedding, I was so excited I felt like I could fly. My husband and son were both dressed in matching tuxedos, and I finally got the chapel wedding I'd always dreamed of. My parents, who had initially opposed the marriage, finally seemed to accept and acknowledge us. They were all smiles at us, the newlyweds. I was worried about Rachel, who was pregnant, and Isabel, who seemed a bit down, but I was overjoyed to have all 4 of my dearest friends present with me. It was a truly, truly happy and wonderful wedding. I had planned so many special things for the reception afterwards. I was sure it would be a great time. I had no inkling of anything amiss. For the reception meal, we had prepared a French full course. I'd often heard brides say they were too nervous to eat much at their reception, but having been married for 3 years already, I was calm and collected. While enjoying the delicious French cuisine, I was comforted watching my son, seated between my husband and me, happily munching on his kid's meal. My son had been such a good boy, sitting quietly. We had promised him that if he got fussy, we'd take him to sit with his grandparents. He looked so adorable behaving like that. The reception went on without a hitch. Greetings from my husband's boss and colleagues I had worked closely with. A slideshow our friends had made showcasing our family's memories. There were tears and laughter. It truly was a great time. We went for a wardrobe change. My son had drawn patterns on our pristine white dress and suit with fabric crayons. All 3 of us matched. For the candlelight service and photo session, I had always known I wanted to wear this dress. After the candlelight service, I took photos with family, relatives, and friends. Everyone complimented my dress, which made me so happy. I caught a glimpse of my husband chatting with Isabel. They knew each other, so there was nothing unusual about it. You see, around the time my husband and I got legally married, Isabel was struggling with workplace harassment at her former job. So, she consulted my husband, who worked in HR, and he spoke on her behalf to his company, leading Isabel to transfer there. Since then, it seemed that Isabel often sought job advice from my husband. Considering I worked in a hotel, I figured my husband, being in the same workplace, would be better equipped to counsel her, so I too asked him to look out for Isabel. My husband appeared to be genuinely concerned, regularly assisting her since then. So, even when I saw Isabel laughing and taking pictures with my husband, I didn't think much of it. Things took a turn right before I was about to read a letter of gratitude to my parents. It happened while I was listening to a guest's speech. All of a sudden, my vision blurred, and everything in front of me seemed to shake. Up until that point, I felt perfectly fine, but all at once, my sight got fuzzy, and my thoughts became jumbled. I've got to hold it together. Even though that's what I thought, maintaining my seated posture became challenging. I'm gonna fall! By the time that thought crossed my mind, I was already on the floor. Michelle! What happened? I could faintly hear the alarmed voices of those around me. Someone shouted, "Call an ambulance," but I wanted to tell them, "No, I'm fine." Yet, I couldn't muster the strength to speak. My husband cradled me, constantly reassuring, "It's okay, it's gonna be all right, Michelle. It's just a sleeping pill, don't you worry. You'll be fine in a jiffy." Sleeping pill? What did he mean by that? I tried to figure it out, but I couldn't, and without understanding what he meant, I lost consciousness. When I came to, I was in a hospital. Beside me, my husband was holding my hand. Once he realized I was awake, he immediately called for the doctor. The doctor's diagnosis? An overdose of sleeping pills. "Do you recall taking anything?" the doctor asked. Of course, I had no such recollection. My husband seemed just as clueless, and we both shook our heads. The police wanted to get involved, considering the possibility of foul play. I told the police I had no memory of the event and had never taken sleeping pills. My husband stated, "We have no clue. Many people were around our food, so it's hard to say who might be suspicious. Heck, it might even be one of the hotel staff for all we know." I remembered my husband telling me, "It's just a sleeping pill, you'll be all right," before I blacked out, which made his statement seem odd to me. In the end, with neither of us having any leads, the culprit remained unidentified. The police said they'd continue their investigation and left. It was decided I should stay in the hospital for a couple of days just to be safe, and our son would be looked after by my parents. Relatives and friends rushed to the hospital for support. Once I was awake, and after the police finished their inquiries, they left. Left alone in the room, I was in a daze for a while. But after some time, feeling thirsty, I decided to drag my stand and head to the hospital shop to grab a drink. Then, in the hallway on the second floor near the store, I spotted my husband and Isabel together. "What's going on?" I thought as I approached. I couldn't believe my ears when I overheard their conversation. "There was no need to go that far. It wasn't a lethal dose, so it's fine. It's your fault for having a wedding with that woman when I'm around. I just ruined it because I didn't like it." Isabel said that, wrapping her arm around my husband. I couldn't process what was happening. What's their relationship? Are they just colleagues? What did she mean by lethal dose? I knew I couldn't get caught listening, so I hid behind a pillar in the hallway to overhear their conversation. My husband caressed Isabel's head, saying, "I'm real sorry. You're the only one that matters to me." I had a feeling Michelle was getting suspicious lately, so I just put on a show with that wedding. I explained it to you, didn't I? I don't want to be taken for a ride with ridiculous child support. It's just till we don't have to spend on Laura anymore. You know? Isabel, narrowing her eyes at her husband, said in a coquettish voice, "You promised, remember?" Hearing that, even I could tell what kind of relationship my husband and Isabel had. They were having an affair. Deceiving me, keeping our marriage intact, all while continuing their illicit relationship. A marriage of convenience just for the sake of it. Moreover, Isabel, who wasn't satisfied with even that ceremony, drugged it to ruin it. I've been betrayed by my husband and Isabel, the two most important people, all this time. After that, tears wouldn't stop flowing. I couldn't bear to watch my husband and Isabel getting all lovey-dovey anymore. I gave up going to the hospital store, returned to my room, and pulled the sheets over my head. My emotions were all over the place, but oddly enough, my mind was clear. The more I thought about it, the more unforgivable what my husband and Isabel did became. I was filled with regret and sadness. "You should rest up." Even though the doctor told me that, I was wide awake and couldn't sleep. I cried all night, and as the sun rose, I was determined to get my revenge on the two of them. 24 hours ago, the love I thought I had for my husband, whom I believed I loved so much, had vanished. And the friendship I valued so much with Isabel had disappeared without a trace. With that resolve, I was plotting my revenge against the two. Unaware of this, my husband came to visit me first thing in the morning and tried to strike up various conversations. Honestly, it was nothing but stressful. "I'm still feeling a bit out of it, so I'm gonna sleep." Saying that, I pulled the covers over and pretended to sleep, all the while lost in thought. I want to take everything away from those two. From my husband, I want to take away our home, his job, and all his money. From Isabel, I want to take away her job, her friends, and my husband. Now, what should I do to achieve that? I couldn't come to a conclusion on my own. However, for now, I needed proof of my husband's and Isabel's affair. I knew that much was necessary. 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Desiring swift revenge on the two of them, the very next day, I headed to a private investigator's office to gather evidence of Tom and Isabel's affair, and to find out whether Isabel had been prescribed sleeping pills. I had 2 requests. After that, I contacted Laura, who's a lawyer. Even though she was surprised when I told her we needed to talk right after my discharge, Laura made time for me. The meeting place? Laura's law office. "Wanna go to a cafe or a restaurant?" I replied to her kind offer. "I'd like to talk somewhere private." So, it was decided to meet at the law firm where Laura worked. In the long run, I had thought of officially hiring her as my attorney, so this might have been for the best. I immediately told Laura everything I had seen that day at the hospital. Laura was visibly shocked, but after some thought, she said, "Come to think of it, Isabel was always praising Tom a lot." Then she added, If it's true that Isabel had an affair with Tom and she's behind the incident, that's despicable. I'd like to think of Isabel as my close friend too, so I really don't want to believe this. However, I'll help you gather all the evidence thoroughly. If we don't find any, we'll pretend this conversation never happened. But if we do, I'll be fully on your side, Michelle. I could understand Laura's disbelief. I'd probably have a hard time believing it if I were in Laura's shoes too. For a while, under Laura's guidance, I tried to gather evidence without letting husband catch on. However, the results weren't great. His phone was securely locked and he always had it with him. He also seemed cautious, as the number of times he went out drinking had decreased. The private detective I hired had the same results. There were pictures of him and Isabel eating together, traveling in a car, but none of them provided solid evidence of an affair. The only progress was with the sleeping pills. I found out that Isabel, who had been bullied at work 3 years ago, had been prescribed them by a doctor, and I learned the type of drug she'd been given. I didn't know what type of sleeping pill I had been given, so I stored this information as evidence to eventually submit to the police. Then, I told Laura about the only evidence I found, which was the medicine. Laura suggested, what if Michelle pretends to be away from home? Maybe Tom will let his guard down? No way. He'd never do that, I laughed, but Laura was serious. I laughed, but Laura was dead serious. You know, I've handled quite a few divorce cases, and it's surprisingly common. Spouses doing things at home when the other's away. I think it's worth giving it a shot. So, I decided to give it a try. The timing was mid-February. Right around Valentine's Day. I want to take our son and visit my parents out in Nebraska before I start working in March, I told him. When I said that, Tom responded, sounds great. Go ahead, and he was supportive. I told him I'd be gone for a week, leaving on a Thursday and coming back the following Wednesday. In reality, the plan was to stay in Nebraska for a couple of nights, show Tom pictures and video calls of us there to reassure him, and then see if anything happened over the weekend. It was all Laura's idea. She also suggested setting up hidden cameras at 3 points in the house: the entrance, living room, and bedroom. This was also Laura's idea, and the camera was something she borrowed from an acquaintance of hers. As planned, I sent Tom pictures of my son and me in Nebraska and made video calls to him. He genuinely seemed happy to see us having a good time. Maybe I had misunderstood what happened at the hospital. I couldn't see any signs of abnormal behavior from husband. But the next day shattered that notion. I checked the surveillance cameras I had set up. First thing in the morning, Tom had turned off the pet camera we use for our son or covered it with cloth. My husband was clearly acting strange. And then, at 7 p.m. It wasn't just husband who came home from work. He brought Isabel with him. Today's Friday. It must have been perfect for the two of them, having the next day off. Maybe Isabel will stay over the entire weekend. I quickly contacted Laura. So, Isabel's the one he's cheating with, huh? After Laura sounded disappointed, she said, come back here tomorrow. We're gonna get revenge on those two. She said that to me. All this time, on the surveillance footage, husband and Isabel were getting all cozy. I stared at the screen, mulling over the revenge plan Laura and I had devised. The next day, I had to go back home after being called into work. I told my parents and had them look after my son. I was hesitant to tell them the truth, but I knew if I did, my dad would say, hold on. I'm coming too. I could already picture him causing a scene, so I held back. Returning to New York, I visited Laura's office. Laura greeted me with a worried look. Michelle, are you okay? I'm fine, I'm fine. Sure, I was shocked for a moment when I saw it yesterday. But I've no love or affection left. I just want to break things off ASAP. Besides, knowing I'll have evidence makes me kinda excited. When I responded like that, Laura looked somewhat relieved. Then, the two of us reviewed the surveillance footage to finalize our plan. Once we confirmed that my husband and Isabel had left the house, we would break in. We had already secured some space for Laura and me in the bedroom closet, so we'd hide there. We'd monitor the surveillance footage, wait for my husband and Isabel to come home, and make our move when they showed evidence. During that, I would snap photos with my smartphone. Laura would record a video. However, my cautious husband didn't seem to want to leave the house at all. Isabel tried persuading him several times, saying, "Come on, let's go out. Let's have a date." But he declined every time. Watching with impatience, they finally left in the car to get groceries for dinner. As soon as Laura and I confirmed that, we executed our plan. We quickly went back to the house and successfully hid in the closet. After waiting for about an hour, my husband and Isabel returned, holding hands. It seemed like Isabel was gonna cook dinner, wearing an apron, but it was evident she had nothing on underneath. Seeing Isabel like that, my husband, seemingly overwhelmed by passion, pushed her onto the couch and started to make a move. We exchanged glances and nodded, then left the closet and approached the two of them. The first to notice me was my husband, who had been holding Isabel from behind. Our eyes met, and my husband froze for about 5 seconds, then turned pale, and immediately let go of Isabel. "Why'd you stop?" Isabel said in a playful voice, lifting her head, and she froze too. She said to the two of them, "I knew you two were in that kind of relationship." I wanted proof but couldn't get any. That's why I made up the story about going back home. Now I can get a divorce.
When did you find out?
My husband asked, his voice trembling. "I overheard you two at the hospital. So, I knew you both drugged me."
Wait a minute, that's not true. I didn't drug her. It was Isabel who did it on her own.
As expected, my husband spilled the beans about the drug. I grinned. "Did you get it, Laura?" "Got it perfectly." With that, Laura entered the living room.
Why the heck is Laura here?
The first to react was Isabel. "Michelle hired me. I didn't want to believe that Isabel was cheating and drugging drinks, so I was helping her gather evidence to prove it wrong. But I was shocked to see that it was actually true on the video."
What do you mean by request?
Tom, having met Laura a few times and knowing her profession, asked anxiously. "Tom, what you did counts as infidelity. Michelle has the right to divorce you and claim alimony."
Whoa! Hold on. It's not like that. It was just a fling with Isabel. Please don't get the wrong idea.
Laura's words shook him, and the husband quickly denied them.
Wait a minute. A fling? You told me once our kid grows up, you were gonna divorce Michelle, didn't you? Was that a lie?
Of course it was. Who the hell would choose someone like you over their family? Isabel was lost for words at husband's harsh statement. Seeing Isabel's reaction, Laura decided to pile on more. "I'm sorry to say this when you're upset, Isabel, but we also got testimony that you drugged Michelle's drink." "So what? You can be charged with crime of injury. The police will be here any minute now."
What?
Laura was speechless. She seemed too shocked to say anything.
Wait. Stop it. It was just a joke, right? Tom, help me out here.
Isabel cried out to my husband for help. Tom ignored Isabel's pleas. Laura said to him, "If you knew that Isabel was mixing in sleeping pills, there's a chance you could be considered an accomplice."
Why me? She did that on her own.
Afterwards, when the police arrived and were shown the footage we had taken earlier, both Isabel and husband were taken to the station for questioning. Additionally, when I mentioned the information I'd obtained from a private investigator about her being prescribed sleeping pills, they responded, "We'll thoroughly investigate that matter as well." I was told that. After Tom and Isabel were taken away, I booked a hotel room and toasted with Laura. I didn't want to spend another second in that house. And for the final touch at the hotel, I sent videos of the affair and the testimony about the sleeping pills to the company where Tom and Isabel worked. The effect was immediate. A week later, husband was questioned at the police station. Fortunately, he wasn't charged, but he did lose his job. After the company saw the 2 videos and confirmed the facts, several testimonies came forward about the 2 acting suspiciously at work. As a result, my husband was forced into voluntary retirement. Everything went according to mine and Laura's plan. Around that time, I began discussions about divorcing my husband. My husband came alone to Laura's office. "Didn't you hire a lawyer?" He replied, "I asked a friend, but they turned me down because they said the odds were overwhelmingly against me." Then, after taking a deep breath, he began to plead.
"That's not why I came today. I came to ask Michelle for forgiveness. Please. I'll pay alimony or whatever it takes, just don't divorce me."
Saying this, my husband got on his knees and begged. I was unmoved by his pleas. Why would anyone want to get back with a man who cheated and is now unemployed? At least, I don't. Let's get a divorce.
"No. I'll never do it again. Please reconsider. And Tom Jr. needs his father, right?"
I was disgusted that he would bring up our son at this point.
"We don't need a jobless father who's been unfaithful. Even without you, I'm confident I can raise our child without any hardship."
Despite what I said, my husband tried to continue with his excuses and begging. Laura interrupted him. "This isn't going anywhere. Should we bring this to mediation? Tom, you're clearly at a disadvantage. The legal fees will just deplete your savings. For us, as long as we get the divorce, it doesn't matter how. But for you, it'll just be like throwing your money away." Tom held his head in his hands and let out a scream. After pondering for a good 5 minutes, my husband finally said, "Give me some time to think," he said in a strained voice, and then left the office. Seeing his state, Laura and I couldn't contain our laughter and burst out laughing. 2 weeks later, Tom messaged me agreeing to the divorce and we decided to meet again. The location was once again Laura's office. My husband who came looked extremely worn out. It seemed like he had given up this time, as he unemotionally accepted all the terms Laura proposed. In the end, he would pay a compensation of $15,000, monthly child support of $400, and I'd also get half of my husband's severance pay. We settled on the agreement with no division of assets for my husband. However, he seemed unable to find a new job and begged, "Can I make the compensation payments in installments?" Without any division of assets, the only money he had was his severance pay. Being jobless, he probably had no choice but to use that for living expenses. Reluctantly, I agreed to let him pay in installments by increasing the compensation to $16,000 as interest. And so, we got divorced without a hitch. I managed to get the money as planned and rendered my husband jobless. I believe I took everything from my husband, family, job, and money. Next is Isabel. 4 days after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from Isabel's lawyer, asking to settle the matter of the wedding out of court. Just like always, we decided to discuss it at Laura's office. As soon as Isabel entered the office, she pleaded, kneeling down, "Please forgive me. I'll pay any amount of compensation." Recalling my husband groveling in Laura's office, I had to chuckle, "Not gonna happen." That's what I replied. "Why? Aren't we friends?"
"I'm hurt."
The look on Isabel's face made me angry.
"Who had an affair with a friend's husband and then drugged me? It was you who betrayed me first, wasn't it, Isabel? I don't consider you a friend anymore." "That's harsh. The sleeping pills weren't a big deal, and I broke up with Tom, didn't I?"
Isabel shouted back. "So what? I'm still hurt.
Besides, if you want Tom, he's all yours."
As I said this, Isabel seemed a bit pleased. "But just so you know, he's unemployed. He quit his job after the affair with you got out. Now he's jobless and can't even pay me alimony. If you're okay with such a man, go ahead. I guess you're content with my leftovers," I said with a smug face. Suddenly, Isabel shrieked and lunged at me. Quickly, her lawyer stepped in to intervene. "That was attempted injury, right? Laura remarked, causing the lawyer's expression to darken. As for the wedding issue, feel free to sue. But please let this one slide, the lawyer pleaded. Laura asked me, Michelle, are you okay with this? When I nodded in agreement, Laura said, all right, we'll drop the settlement. We'll proceed with suing Isabel.
No way! Laura, that's too harsh. I never did anything to you.
I'm not your friend. Nancy and Rachel, after hearing about this, were disgusted with you. Don't you think you're out of friends? When Laura said this, Isabel began crying hysterically. That's so unfair. What did I even do? Probably fearing another assault, Isabel was practically dragged out of the office by her lawyer. Laura and I burst into laughter. No matter what you did, it wasn't an affair and an injury case.
Well, which one is worse?
But with this, I successfully took away Isabel's job, friends, and husband. I felt very satisfied. It's been 6 months since then. In the end, since we didn't settle out of court, Isabel was arrested for causing injury. Isabel's parents apparently heard about the arrest from Laura and her friends, and they came to apologize with compensation. According to her parents, she won't likely get probation because she's been denying and showing a bad attitude. We've tried talking to her, but she seems to have given up and won't listen. On the other hand, her ex-husband seems to be struggling just to pay the compensation. He apparently hasn't been able to find a full-time job yet and is working a construction-related part-time job during the day. At night, he's juggling a job in the cleaning industry, desperately trying to cover alimony, child support, and his own living expenses. I'd be in a bit of a bind if the money stopped coming in, so I hope he doesn't work himself to the ground. As planned, I returned to the hotel job. I've been leaving my son in daycare, so I feel bad he might be lonely, but I make sure to spend all my off days playing with him. With the money I got from my ex-husband, I can easily make a down payment on a condo, so I'm also house hunting. Once things settle down at the hotel, I'm gonna pay the down payment and buy it. My current life, with work and time with my son, is much more fulfilling and fun than when I was a stay-at-home mom living with my ex. Moving forward, I want to cherish this life and hope to someday meet someone great. In a note written in my husband's handwriting, it said he'd be on a business trip for a month. Seeing it, I was certain. Our marriage was over. It was that night, alone in a room with no one around, lost in thought. What's happening now? In the dead of night while my husband was away, I suddenly heard the cry of a baby. I rushed to the front door and found a letter. And it read, I can't raise him. To my astonishment, there was a baby inside a cardboard box along with the letter.
Why is there a baby here?
It was a situation I had only seen on TV shows. My mind raced, unsure of what to do, and the next thing I knew, I was calling my husband.
Don't bother me when I'm busy. You're getting in the way.
My husband snapped at me for calling. But when I told him about the baby, he responded with startling words.
We're gonna raise this child. Got it?
With that, he hung up. His words lingered in my mind. There was definitely something going on. Well, I've got my own suspicions. At this point, 1 or 2 more problems don't matter. I'll find out everything and drag you down. My name is Jessica. I'm a 40-year-old housewife. I used to work for a major corporation, but I resigned when I married my husband, Mike. I met Mike about 5 years ago. Back then, he came to the company I worked for as a salesman. He was cheerful and a bit of a joker. I wondered then if he was cut out for sales. But when it came to work, he spoke seriously and clearly, surprising all the coworkers. I still remember how he left such an impression on me. A month later, while taking a break on a park bench near the office, a man in a suit approached and asked, "Is this seat taken?" Feeling annoyed, I didn't look at the man's face and just said, "Sure," intending to leave the spot. But then the man hurriedly stopped me. "Hey there, Ms. Johnson. How've you been?" Wondering how he knew my last name, I looked at him. "Oh? Mr. Smith?
Good to see you. Thanks for the other day. Thank you. Thanks to you, Mr. Johnson, everything at work went smoothly. I really appreciate it. Mike, who I hadn't seen in a while, was just as playful as before, chatting up a storm with me. I naturally talked to him about work and everyday life. From then on, whenever I took a break, Mike was always there beside me. Although it was just for a short time, I cherished the moments spent with Mike, and soon found myself wanting to be with him all the time. Turns out, Mike felt the same way. How about a real date? Not just a 1-hour break, but a genuine date. Yes. That was the turning point for us. We became a couple, and a year later, we got married. And this year, we celebrated our 4th wedding anniversary. Jessica, thanks for being with me all these years. Same goes for you. Thanks for always cherishing me. Celebrating our wedding anniversary together. I was overwhelmed with emotion, feeling so fortunate to have married Mike, and tears welled up. Jessica, it's become a yearly tradition for you to cry, huh? Shush. They're happy tears, okay? Give me a break. I get it. This happiness will last forever. Back then, that's what I believed. But as our 5th anniversary approached, I realized that had been just an illusion. For the past 6 months, Mike's been coming home late. He used to always come home right on time, but now he's usually home after 8 p.m. Honey, how much longer are these late nights gonna last? It's been half a year. This never used to happen. Doesn't it seem strange? Business hasn't been great. At this rate, our bonuses are gonna get cut. Everyone's working their tails off. Under normal circumstances, I would have believed him, but something felt off to me. My husband's company, although considered a small to medium-sized business, is quite well known around here. Their revenues have been increasing year after year, and they're always hiring new employees. Can a company like that suddenly experience a drop in sales? Having employees work overtime for half a year because of tight sales is simply not normal. I don't want to doubt my husband's words, but there's this nagging feeling deep down. Oh, by the way, I'm gonna head out for a bit. Huh? You just got home. I'm just meeting someone I know, that's okay, right? Considering he's been working late recently, I figured it wouldn't hurt to let him go once in a while. Just don't be out too late, okay? You've got work tomorrow. Thanks. I'll be back soon. Mike quickly changed into his casual clothes and with a big grin, left to meet his friend. That night, Mike didn't return home until past midnight. Oh, sorry, did I wake you? You're okay? That's pretty late. We just got caught up chatting, and it got late. I see. I'm sleepy, so I'm gonna head to bed. Good night. The next morning, when I woke up, Mike, who usually sleeps beside me, was nowhere to be found. Rubbing my sleepy eyes and looking around, he was still missing. Checking my phone, it was just past 5 a.m., even before my alarm. Mike? I called out, but there was no answer from him. I wondered where he went and headed to the living room, only to find Mike sound asleep on the couch. Why are you sleeping here? I tried to wake him up to get him to bed, but Mike didn't budge. And then, something fell from his hand to my feet. Is that his phone? I picked up the dropped phone intending to place it on the table. That's when I noticed the image of a woman's back on the phone's screen. Who is this? A celebrity? I guess it's fine. I put my phone on the table. Can't get back to sleep now. Maybe I should take a walk. I left my husband sleeping on the couch and decided to go for a walk. Stepping outside, the warm sunlight and a refreshing breeze greeted me. Ah, this feels so good. Morning walks on a sunny day are the best. It's a great way to start the day. After about an hour, I came back home. When I entered the living room, I found my husband looking sternly at my phone. Good morning. Why the long face? Want something to drink? No thanks. Usually, he'd reply with a smile, but today he seemed off. Maybe he's just groggy from sleep? But then, his next words made me realize it was something different. Hey, can you not talk to me so much in the morning? Huh? It's just, you're kind of annoying. I was taken aback. He'd never spoken to me like that before. Without another word, he went to our bedroom, changed into his suit, and left for work without breakfast. Without our usual morning hug. While I was doing housework, puzzled by my husband's strange behavior this morning, my cell phone rang from an unknown caller. Normally, I wouldn't answer calls from unknown numbers, but for some reason, I picked up this time. Hello? Hi, is this Jessica? Yes, who's this?
It's been a while. It's Sarah. Sarah Lewis. Remember we worked together a while back?
Lewis. Sarah Lewis. Then it hit me. 12 years ago, right after graduating from college, I worked at a convenience store for a short time. Back then, Sarah Lewis, who was still in high school, worked there too. Why on earth was she calling me now? And how did she get my cell number? It's been ages, Sarah. I never expected a call from you. It's quite a surprise. I never thought I'd call you either, Jessica. If it weren't for that crazy coincidence, I wouldn't have. But I thought, why not give it a shot? She was always like this. She probably doesn't mean any harm, but there's always something about Sarah that gets under my skin. That's just so typical of her. So, what's this big coincidence? You're not gonna believe this. I work at the same company as Mike. Your husband, Mike. Really? When I heard from Mike that his wife's name was Jessica, I wondered if it was you. And it turned out I was right. When I told Mike we used to work together, he gave me your number. It was indeed a crazy coincidence that the girl I worked with back then was now working with my husband. But at the same time, I felt a bit betrayed that Mike gave her my number without asking me first. I'm glad you called, but aren't you working right now? Is it okay to be on the phone?
Obviously, it's not, but now that I've heard your voice, I should get back to work. Talk to you later. Bye.
She's still as lively as ever. I never thought I'd hear her voice again after 15 years. It made me a little nostalgic, thinking about the old times. It's been 15 years since then. And later that night. I'm home. Welcome back. You must be tired. The bath is ready, so you can hop in. Wait, what? From behind my husband, a woman suddenly appeared and greeted, "Good evening." A colleague from work?
It's me. Sarah.
Unbelievably, my husband had come home with Sarah, who had called earlier that day. Both of them held large shopping bags in their hands. Hold on a minute. I wasn't told you'd be coming over. When Sarah called earlier, she said she'd catch up later. You should have figured she'd come today. As a wife, you should know these things. I was slightly infuriated by my husband's irrational comment, but held my tongue since we had a guest. I wonder if they're that close, calling Sarah with such a friendly nickname? Hee hee. I caught a brief chuckle from her. What was that? While I was distracted, the two had moved into the living room. I let out a sigh and followed, only to find them laying out a bunch of alcohol and snacks from their bags on the table. What do you think you're doing?
We're gonna have some drinks here. Mike said we should drink at home, so I bought a bunch.
That's not enough, make us something. I wasn't expecting this. I only made dinner for the two of us. With that, Mike gave me a cold look and said, "Then go buy something now." What's with that attitude?
Excuse me? You have a problem when I'm the one feeding you?
His chilly gaze was now replaced with a commanding tone. This was nothing like the Mike I knew, and as I tried to hide my shock, she gave me a sly smile. Even in my own home, what is this overwhelming feeling of alienation? Unable to bear being there any longer, I immediately headed out to do some shopping.
What the hell?
Although worried someone might hear, I couldn't stop muttering to myself. This continued even as I shopped at the grocery store. This should be enough. An hour later, I returned to the apartment after finishing my shopping. Standing at the front door, I took a deep breath and opened it, only to find an eerie silence enveloping the place. Hello? There was no sound of their voices. I gently opened the living room door and saw the two of them, snuggled up on the couch, asleep like a couple. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what was happening right before my eyes. And from that day on, Sarah's visits to our home became frequent. She'd come over with Mike, and they'd casually start their evening drinks as if it was second nature. Hey, get us something to eat. I'd love a steak, please. Come on now. If you heard her, hurry up and get it. It felt as though I had been relegated to a mere housemaid, taken for granted. Mike doted on Sarah, and it was evident he hardly had me in his thoughts anymore. On her part, Sarah often threw condescending remarks my way, making me feel utterly humiliated. I'd never felt so low. My feelings towards the two of them were nothing but negative. Ever since Sarah started calling, I felt like I had been living in a never-ending nightmare. I bore the brunt of their taunts and verbal abuse. I often found myself wanting to escape this toxic environment. 6 months after Sarah started visiting, she suddenly stopped showing up. Around the same time, Mike began coming home even later. One morning, I woke up and noticed Mike wasn't in bed. I headed to the living room and found a note on the table. In Mike's handwriting, it simply read, "Gonna be on a business trip for a month." Seeing that, I was certain. I realized our marriage was over. One night, as I sat alone in the empty room lost in thought. What was that? In the middle of the night, while Mike was away, I suddenly heard the cries of a baby. I rushed to the front door and found a letter. It read, "I can't raise this child." Incredibly, inside the cardboard box was a baby, along with a letter.
Why is there a baby?
It was a situation I had only ever seen on TV shows, but now it was happening to me. My mind raced in panic, unsure of what to do, and before I knew it, I was calling my husband.
Don't bother me when I'm busy. You're disturbing me.
He was furious that I had called. But when I told him about the baby, he replied with shocking words.
We're gonna raise that child. Got it?
And with that, he hung up. His words lingered in my mind. Something was definitely up. But I had my own plans. I didn't care if 1 or 2 more troubles came up now. So, I'll uncover everything and bring you down to rock bottom. After that, I quickly grabbed some things and left the apartment. 2 hours by car. It's been a long time since I've been back. Even outside the apartment, there was a place for me to go.
Welcome home.
Mom, I'm back. I had already informed my mother that I would be returning. At the same time, I had asked her for a favor. Mom, about that favor I asked. I've made the contacts, Jessica. Now, all you need to do is act. Though I had come back to my parents' house thinking of resting and healing from everything, there was no time for that. My husband, Mike, would be back from his business trip in a month. I had things that needed to be done by then. One day, as I was cleaning the room, Mike called. Hello?
Hey! Where the heck are you right now?
My husband was immediately aggressive on the phone.
You call out of the blue? What on earth could someone on a business trip possibly want? I don't give a darn about that. Where are you?
I came back early. It's amazing you still have a job. Normally, you'd be the first on the layoff list.
Shut it. Just tell me where you are.
No matter what I said, Mike insisted on knowing my location, making it impossible to have a conversation. I'm at my parents' house.
The kid's there with you, right?
Yes, sleeping soundly in the back room. Come back with the child right now. Got it? Get back here immediately. His behavior was so different from before, it reminded me of the man he once was. You've changed a lot. You weren't like this before.
People change, Jessica. Anyway, don't forget what I just told you. Understand?
With that, Mike hung up. It's absurd. But if he hasn't mentioned that thing, does that mean he hasn't noticed it? If he returned to the apartment, he'd definitely see it. If that's the case, it makes sense. It became clear that Mike wasn't at the apartment. Not wanting to waste this opportunity, I drove straight there. Upon arriving, I grabbed that from the table and immediately headed to a specific location. 20 minutes later, I arrived at a single-family apartment complex. You live in a pretty nice place. There was a familiar compact car parked in front of the apartment. Just as I thought. A familiar compact car. It's Mike's car. And the fact that it's parked here is proof that my husband must be here. What could be so important that he'd cut his business trip short to be here? At that moment. Then it happened. From inside the house, I heard a woman's scream. And right after that, a man's furious shout echoed. This might be bad. I quickly pulled out my cell from my bag and called someone. However, throughout that time, cries from the woman and shouts from the man continued to emanate from the house. Just when I was getting really worried, a car pulled up behind me. Oh. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. On a whim, I tried the doorknob and to my surprise, it was unlocked. I cautiously opened the door and called out, but there was no response. From deeper within the house, a voice cried out for help. Rushing to the room from where the voice came, I found a man menacingly approaching Sarah with a look of fury on his face. Why are you here? What are you doing? You shouldn't be threatening a woman like this, especially as an adult. Shut up. Stay out of it. This is between me and her. A problem, huh? I couldn't help but think, isn't the problem yourself, in my mind? Jessica! Please help me! He suddenly attacked me. All right. I can see what's happening, so you don't have to spell it out for me. Well, what? You just told him not to treat women like this. And now you're being so dismissive of me? Can't you see I'm in distress? That's because I get it, okay? Just be quiet for a second. I've got things to handle. While Sarah was complaining about something, I had more pressing matters to attend to. I have more important things to deal with than that. I stepped outside the house for a moment and headed towards a car parked outside. I called out, "Excuse me," and from inside the car, a well-built man stepped out. And with that man, I headed back to the room where the two were. Who's this old man? Why's he here? Upon seeing the new arrival, both of them froze. Allow me to introduce you. This is Sarah's father, Mr. Carter. What? Seeing Sarah's father, Mike instantly distanced himself from Sarah, a complete change from his previous demeanor. On the other hand, Sarah's face turned pale as a ghost at the sight of her father and she froze, looking down. Nice to meet you. I'm Carter, Sarah's father. Jessica called me over. What the heck is going on here? Sarah, what's your relationship with this man? The two clearly looked intimidated by Carter's imposing tone and demeanor. He's my husband. What? So, you're telling me you were having an affair with my daughter? Well, that's one way to put it. At that moment, Carter's face turned fierce, glaring at Mike with piercing eyes. Mike looked like a deer caught in headlights, completely frozen. Soon, Carter's face was inches away from Mike's. Mike looked utterly clueless about what to do next. You made your bed, now lie in it. It wasn't clear if it was these words that broke Mike's spirit, but he collapsed on the spot. From her bag, I took out a paper and placed it in front of Mike. I think you'll understand when you see it, it's a divorce paper. My name's already on it. You just need to sign. She also placed a pen next to it. Defeated, Mike signed the divorce paper without resistance. Thanks. As for alimony, my lawyer will be in touch later. We'll discuss the details then. Mike silently nodded. But this incident wasn't over. Standing nearby was the very man who had ruined Jessica's life. You're truly despicable. You played with my feelings, always threatening to leave. And this is how you end things? Jessica spat these words out at her ex-husband. But, to her surprise, he responded with newfound vigor.
You say I played with you? Don't kid yourself. You were the one who approached me first. Saying you had feelings for me. Saying you wanted to be with me. If it wasn't for you, my life wouldn't have turned out this way. What the heck? Anyone who'd take that seriously is the fool. First off, thinking you're some big catch is your first mistake. Because of you, my life's a complete mess. Being seen by my dad in a place like this is just the worst. Huh? What's that supposed to mean? If anyone's the worst here, it's you. I turned you down, but you kept saying you wanted our baby. And when the baby came, you said it wasn't what you intended, that you didn't expect to really have a child. That you wanted to live your life and wanted a break, but you didn't want the responsibility of the child. So, leave it to me, right? You're way more to be blamed. I didn't say all that.
This is going nowhere, and listening to this nonsense is just a waste of time. Okay, stop. I've heard enough from both of you, just cut it out. You're making everyone irritated. The two looked over, panting, as if wanting to say something. I could tell they wanted to say something, but probably seeing Carter standing next to me, they seemed too scared to utter a word. I get it, if you have a big, intimidating guy like that staring you down, you'd be too scared to say anything. Then Carter suddenly asked Sarah. What's going on with this story? Are you pregnant with his child?
Oh, no, Dad, it's not like that. I didn't want this, but he was so pushy.
Darn it. I completely forgot to mention that Sarah was pregnant.
What? Why are you blaming me? You were the one who came on to me. It's not true. I didn't do anything. How can a baby come if you didn't do anything?
Adding fuel to the fire. You.
That's right. If you hadn't done anything, none of this would have happened. I probably shouldn't have invited him in the first place. Hey, hold on.
She added more. I thought we were pretty much done, but since we're here, I'll give you this. I casually tossed several photos onto the table. Those pictures undeniably proved their affair. These are pictures capturing the two of you in the act. It was a real hassle getting these. While you were on your business trip, I had the divorce papers drawn up and hired a detective. All this in such a short time, you know? Why would you go through all that trouble? Well, I had to. I can draw up the divorce papers myself, but to catch you two cheating, I needed a pro. It did cost me a pretty penny, but thanks to that, I got the evidence. I'm just presenting it a bit late, but you have to really take in the fact that you cheated, right? The sight of the incriminating photos completely deflated the two. Just as they thought it was over. You two better be ready for what's coming. What? Dad. Carter only found out about Sarah and Mike's affair moments ago. And it was only from words. Upon seeing the photos, he realized that they really were having an affair. Sarah, I'm taking you straight home. We'll decide what to do next once we're there. And Mike, you'll have to pay Jessica alimony, right? You need the money ASAP, don't you? I know a place where you can make good money. Upon hearing this, both were trembling in fear. Days later, both of them resigned from their jobs. The reason was that news of their affair had spread throughout the office, making it uncomfortable for them to stay. Later, as Carter told it, Sarah tried to go back to her parents' home and hoped they would forgive her. However, their anger didn't subside, and she was kicked out along with her baby. Now, she's living in a rundown apartment, working day and night to support her child. As for her ex-husband, he's working at a high-paying job Carter recommended to cover the alimony and child support. Apparently, it's a job at sea, and once he leaves, he can't return for several months. Well, after such a betrayal, it's only fitting. As for me, I stayed at my parents' home. My mother helps with the housework, and I have found a new job and made some new friends.
Life feels more fulfilling now. My parents often ask when I'll marry again, but I think I'll wait for a while. Maybe when I meet the right person, I'll think about it. For now, I want to enjoy this life.
Listen to me, I'm gonna divorce you.
Facing my adamant refusal, Jack blurted that out. Next to him, Catherine was saying, "Please take care of us soon." I thought I had been devoted to Jack and Catherine, but apparently, I was mistaken. For them, living together seemed to be the ultimate act of filial piety. I've been turning down the idea of cohabitation for about 5 years, but it seems I've reached my limit. I do as Jack says and pack my things to leave the house. A few days later, I received hundreds of calls from Jack. My name is Natalie. I'll be turning 48 this year. Jack and I have been married for about 20 years. We weren't head over heels in love even when we were dating. Jack seemed indifferent to romance, and I didn't think he was that interested in it. We have one child, but he's already moved out, so it's just Jack and I in the house. Jack has a rather dominating personality, a tad intimidating. But given my laid-back nature, I never really minded his quirks too much. We've been together since high school, and though I hesitated when Jack proposed, I eventually decided to marry him. In the early days of our marriage, I was a stay-at-home wife, taking care of the household and attending to tasks given by my in-laws. After some time, our child was born, and the enthusiastic grandparents would often visit our place. Initially, I was told that living with in-laws was off the table.
I wouldn't want to live with my parents always around. It'd be stifling. We're never gonna live with them.
I believed those words and decided to marry Jack. However, as our child grew older, out of the blue, Jack proposed living with his parents. Sure, our child became more independent, and in a few years, he'd be off to college. But I was against the idea of living with my in-laws, and I made it clear every time the subject came up. We had several discussions about cohabitating, and I rejected them all. Every time, Jack would become grumpy. Maybe he thought I'd eventually agree? There were mainly 2 reasons why I didn't want to live together. Firstly, I didn't get along with my mother-in-law, Catherine. Shortly after our marriage, I was often summoned to my in-laws' place. Since I wasn't working at that time, I'd always rush over if they needed any assistance. But even when I hurried, Catherine would complain, "You're late. How long do you think I've been waiting? The TV isn't working, please check it." And it wouldn't even be urgent matters. At first, it felt like minor nuisances, but over time her actions escalated. During a family gathering, everyone was served lunch except for me. They had ordered sushi for the day, and there wasn't any for me. So, I had no choice but to eat alone at a nearby diner. As Catherine's blatant acts of hostility increased, I tried discussing it with Jack once. "I think your mom has been giving me a hard time." I was hesitant to talk about it, but can you maybe speak to her? I tried to approach it gently, but Jack took it as criticism. Feeling that I had insulted his mother, he got furious and gave me the cold shoulder for a while. That made it even harder for me to confide in him. From that point on, I felt Jack's attitude towards me changed. He was never the type to help around the house, but he used to assist when I asked. However, after discussing Catherine, he started ignoring even my simplest requests. While I kept refusing the cohabitation, Jack's mood worsened even more. Not only did his demeanor change drastically, but he also began coming home late and even hinted at having an affair. Not only did Jack's attitude change drastically, but he also stopped coming home. Moreover, he even began to make comments hinting at infidelity. "I'm going out for drinks with a lady tonight, so I'll be late," Jack would say, only to return home the next afternoon. This went on for about 4 years. Even if the love is waning, no one can stand being treated like that by their spouse. I became so worn out that even my kids began to worry about me. My friends also started telling me, "You look thin. I mean, more worn out. You should eat properly and get some rest." Although I knew I needed to do something, I couldn't bring myself to act.
That's when a friend approached me with a job offer at her flower shop. One of my friends owned the shop and had a vacancy. She thought it might help lift my spirits. When I told Jack and Catherine about my new job, they casually remarked, "It's good you're working. We need to support ourselves." That's true. We could live on Jack's salary, but I'd feel better knowing Natalie has an income, Catherine chimed in. Of course, I planned to contribute to household expenses since I lived with Jack. But that doesn't mean I'm doing it for Jack or Catherine. Working at the flower shop lightened my mood, and people began to say I looked happier. When I was a stay-at-home mom, I felt down dealing with Jack and Catherine all the time. However, interacting with various people at the shop made me realize how much I enjoyed working. This newfound happiness made me less inclined to go home. I'd often lie to Jack about working late, just to avoid seeing him, or go out to dinner with friends. This went on for about a year. About 5 years after we started discussing living together, Jack called me for a talk. He began pointing out that I had been spending a lot of time outside. My spending habits had become reckless since I started working, and I wasn't doing household chores anymore. Then, he stated that someone as lazy as me was not needed in the house. To add insult to injury, he said he would forgive everything if I agreed to move in with him. I firmly refused as usual. But just then, Catherine, probably waiting in the next room, burst in.
Why are you so against moving in? Did I do something wrong? She smirked.
Jack defended her, saying Catherine hadn't done anything and that it was just my bad attitude. I reiterated my decision not to move in with them, but it seemed they didn't get the message. Jack threatened, "You better start listening, or I'm gonna file for divorce." Catherine jumped in, "Please take care of us soon." Though I had endured so much, that day was the last straw. While I kept things calm at the moment, the next day, I decided to pack my things and leave the house. I waited until I was sure Jack was at work to make my move. I couldn't take everything, so I packed only the essentials. Contemplating where to go, I realized my only option was to turn to my parents. When I called them, they were happy to come pick me up. Honestly, I thought my mom would be angry, since she'd previously urged me to get married. However, after explaining the situation, she told me to come back. A few hours after the call, my parents arrived in a large van. Apparently, they had rented a big vehicle just for this. Feeling loved, I decided to move all my belongings out. That night, I received a call from Jack, who probably had finished work. "Hey, I noticed your stuff is gone from the house. You're not actually thinking of getting a divorce, are you?" he said. I let him know that's exactly what I was planning. I pointed out that the business card of a divorce attorney was on the table and told him from now on to communicate through the lawyer. Jack was livid.
"Where are you now? Come back. I'll teach you a lesson," he started shouting threats.
I've never experienced physical violence from Jack before, but this time, it might be best not to talk to him directly. Caught off guard by the mention of a lawyer, Jack hesitated for a moment but soon started throwing insults again. I could hear Catherine in the background, yelling,
"Forget about her. I'll find someone even better for you. If you get divorced now, you can choose from a bunch of girls."
Catherine probably doesn't know what's gonna happen to Jack next. However, if she agrees to a divorce in any form, it's convenient for me. Jack started listening to Catherine's words, and seemed to be leaning towards the idea of a divorce. And then, he said, "You sure you want to divorce me? You ain't gonna find another good man like me anytime soon," and hung up the phone. After that, there was no contact from Jack or Catherine, and I enjoyed a moment of peace at my parents' house. The flower shop where I work is managed by a friend, and thanks to their consideration, I was allowed to take some time off. At my parents' house, I enjoyed my mom's home-cooked meals and had a drink in the evening with my dad, forgetting the bad stuff. However, I guess Jack got a call from the lawyer because he started calling me angrily again. I told him to communicate through the lawyer, but did he not listen? The reason why Jack kept contacting me was clear. I had gathered evidence that would be beneficial for me during the divorce. For a long time, Jack often hinted at cheating. I was initially shocked, but I had a feeling we might divorce someday, so I recorded conversations just in case. He wasn't actually cheating, but it was true he went out for dinner with another woman. This was confirmed by a local private investigator. With this information alone, it wasn't enough to claim he cheated, but because I had his recorded statements, I could present it as evidence of his affair. Jack was furious about this and kept calling me. I didn't need to be in touch with Jack anymore, but I couldn't help but wonder how he'd react, so I answered the phone. The first thing he blurted out was, "What the heck is this? I haven't cheated on you. Where's the evidence, huh? Is this some kind of fabrication? Cut the crap. Do you enjoy tarnishing my reputation? And you want to claim compensation for the emotional stress I've supposedly caused you? If anything, I should be the one asking." He was shouting at the top of his lungs. He was so loud that his voice distorted and I couldn't hear some parts. Given how aggressive Jack was, I expected he'd be reluctant about the divorce. But a few days later, for some reason, he easily agreed to it. The reason being, Catherine ended up covering the compensation fee. I was surprised that Catherine had that kind of money, but if it meant he'd agree to the divorce, it wasn't an issue. I decided to accept the offer from Jack's side. After consulting with my attorney, we ended up slightly reducing the compensation amount. But it can't be helped. It's common to ask for a bit more initially and then reduce the amount later, to make it easier for the other party to accept. Just when I thought I could finally get the compensation and get divorced, it seems it won't be that easy. Just when the divorce seemed to be finalized, Jack decided to return to his in-laws' place. But when he got there, he found Catherine and her father, Kenneth, fighting. The reason was Catherine's affair. Jack, who happened to be there, got an earful from Kenneth as well.
Are you two kidding me? Even though you have your life partners, you let your hearts be stolen by someone else. I've been patient till now, but I can't take it anymore. Both of you, get out. No. I haven't cheated on anyone. If you say I have, show me the evidence.
Catherine was defiant against Kenneth, but she was speechless when Kenneth showed her the photos. The photos showed Catherine arm in arm with her lover. Catherine had no words when presented with the undeniable evidence. On the other hand, Jack said, "I didn't cheat. This is something Natalie did on her own. The evidence shown is fake. It's a frame-up. There's no need to kick me out too." But Kenneth wasn't hearing any of it. Their argument was so loud, the entire neighborhood could hear it. Or so I heard later from a friend who lived nearby. They say like father, like son, but this seemed too much. Just like me, Kenneth had gathered evidence of Catherine's infidelity. Unlike Jack, Catherine really did cheat. She had been cheating for about 5 years, and Kenneth had noticed a while ago. Once he realized, he hired a private investigator and gathered evidence of her infidelity. Not only did Kenneth have photos of Catherine cheating, but he also had emails with content suggesting an affair. Catherine wasn't good with smartphones and hadn't set a password, so it was possible to gather the emails as evidence. Later, given our similar situations, I had a chance to talk with Kenneth. That's when he showed me the photos he used as evidence. The photos I received from the private investigator were pretty clear and showed evidence of cheating. Just having their arms around each other isn't enough proof, but the content of the texts clearly showed infidelity. From my own experience, I understood how important evidence really is.
My lawyer even said, having evidence puts you in a significantly better position. In Natalie's case, there are recordings, so even if there wasn't actual cheating, it proves that the marital relationship has severely broken down. You can definitely get a divorce.
The difference between me and Kenneth was whether we were considering divorce. By the time I had gathered enough evidence, I was already prepared for the possibility of divorce. However, even after Kenneth found proof of infidelity, he continued with his married life. He said he continued the marriage because of the deep bond formed over the years they spent together. After the divorce, when Kenneth told me this, it reminded me of how I felt. When you spend years with someone, there's a point where you realize you're together more out of habit than love. If both parties communicate well during these times, it's probably not an issue. In reality, couples who've been together for years, or married couples who've been together for decades, communicate well. Kenneth and I just chose the wrong partners and couldn't manage that. Jack had a hard time with Shuji and Catherine, but in the end, the two were thrown out of their home. Having nowhere to go, they reluctantly ended up in a monthly apartment. It seems like Jack and Catherine were quite alike, often spending recklessly at convenience stores and buying unnecessary branded items. That's why they had hardly any savings when they were evicted. The reason I knew about their lack of savings is because they begged me to lend them money for the monthly apartment's rent. I had already divorced Jack and hadn't received any alimony from him, so I didn't lend him any money. So, if they could afford a monthly apartment, they must have borrowed money from relatives or acquaintances. However, monthly apartments have month-to-month contracts, so they'll have to leave after a month. Right now, people are keeping their distance from Jack. The reason is that I told everyone about what Jack did. Jack and I had been dating since our college days, so we had many mutual friends. Coincidentally, soon after our divorce, I was invited to a reunion. At the reunion, there were updates on everyone's lives, and I was asked about what I was doing now and how things were with Jack. I didn't think lying was right, and I had nothing to hide, so I honestly reported everything Jack and Catherine had done. Some classmates had lent money to Jack and were angry about the way he approached them.
That guy always has an excuse for not paying back. I lent him $1,000 thinking of our old friendship. Guess I'll have to write that off. But I never imagined he'd do something so terrible to Natalie. I wish she had confided in us, one said, while also taking my side.
Since then, my interaction with friends increased, and Jack lost his. Having no one left to borrow from, Jack began visiting supermarkets late at night, looking for half-priced ready-made meals. The reason I know this is because I ran into him at a supermarket just before closing. Jack kept walking back and forth in the deli section, waiting for the half-price stickers to be applied. Finally, when they did put half-price stickers on the meals, Jack headed to the cashier. But it seemed he didn't have enough money, even with the discount.
Can't you just discount it by a few cents? It's no big deal. If the cashier can't be flexible, I'm gonna complain, he shouted and stormed out of the store.
I didn't want to bump into him, so I waited for a while before leaving. But even after 30 minutes, Jack was still outside the supermarket. There was someone there arguing with him.
Why couldn't you buy it? It's strange. I'm starving, and I haven't eaten anything today. Do something and get some food.
The person arguing with Jack was Catherine. From their conversation, it seemed they were struggling even to eat that day. Trying not to be noticed, I pulled my hat down further and left the supermarket. After finalizing my divorce with Jack, I decided to re-enter the workforce. I was really surprised when I found a company willing to hire me on a contract basis at my age. I made up my mind to work hard to give back to this company. I had always thought I wasn't cut out for work, but as I tackled challenges head-on, I began to receive positive feedback. Most of my managers in the department are younger than me, but thanks to their thorough training, I can see my skills growing. Initially, I was just a contractor, but recently they approached me about becoming a full-time employee. With a full-time position, there'll be more opportunities and challenges. And naturally, I'll earn more money. I've been saving up since my single days, enough to afford a house. Now that I've divorced Jack, I don't plan on remarrying. So, I decided to buy a condo when I got the promotion. In the past, I bumped into Jack and Catherine at a local Walmart, so part of my reason for moving was to avoid running into them. If we live in the same area, we might bump into each other again. As of now, Jack hasn't tried to reconcile or asked for money, but you never know. Friends and family advised me to move as far away as possible. The new place is a bit far from work, but it's well connected, so I can easily go shopping downtown. The condo is just right for a single person like me, not too big, but spacious enough. Now, I'll have to work even harder to pay off my mortgage. But, after living there for about 6 months, I started to feel a bit lonely. I don't plan to remarry, and it's a bit too small for roommates. Just when I was pondering this, I found a stray kitten outside my apartment. I decided to watch it for a while, thinking its mother might show up. I thought the mother cat might show up and take the kitten away at some point, but the next day, the kitten was still in the same spot outside my apartment building, crying just like the day before. With winter approaching, I couldn't bear the thought of it freezing outside, so after consulting with my building manager, I decided to adopt it. The building allows pets, and as long as I take care of it, there's no issue. This playful kitten runs to me as soon as I get home. She's not picky with food and often snuggles into my bed during cold mornings. I wasn't particularly fond of cats before, but now I can't imagine life without her. I even show off her pictures at work, and I'm always talking about how she's the cutest. They say my child is the cutest, and I find myself oddly agreeing with that. I have a few friends who also have cats, so it's reassuring to know I can ask them for advice. These days, I look forward to coming home to my waiting cat. At the airport, getting ready for our honeymoon, I pulled out the ticket holder from my bag, following my husband's instructions. That's when it happened. My husband snatched the plane ticket from my hand and threw these words at me.
"You're not worth it. I should have gone with someone else."
He then ran towards another woman. Watching him, a secret smile crept onto my lips, and I took out my phone.
"Well, time to go as planned."
My name is Michelle Anderson. Ever since I graduated from college, I've been working at a trading company in New York, now 30 years old. My husband of the same age, John, is a journalist registered with a publishing house. We met in the same college seminar. Back then, I wasn't particularly ambitious about my future job, but John, with his dreams, pursuing job opportunities, seemed radiant. He always said he wanted to be a reporter, chasing stories for newspapers or magazines. He definitely had a spark in him. Seeing each other often in the same seminar, our conversations grew more frequent over the course of 2 years. By the time graduation approached, I didn't want to part ways, so under his proactive approach, we started dating. We lived together for 3 years after graduation. Then, at 27, we made it official. However, we didn't have a wedding ceremony, reception, or even a honeymoon. Both our parents weren't thrilled about it, but while it was easy for me to get extended time off, John, who always prioritized his work, especially during incidents, couldn't do the same.
What about life's milestones? What if something happens to one of your family members all of a sudden? Would you say the same?
Even when I said that.
What are you talking about? Funerals are one thing, but weddings are a matter of personal choice. The stories I'm chasing right now can't wait.
I couldn't argue with that. After all, John's job was relentless, around the clock. I remember how ecstatic he was the year before we got married, as he finally got assigned to the editorial department of the weekly magazine he'd always wanted to work for. Now, he's busier than ever, working day and night. Well, not just now. Even before we lived together, his apartment was a mess, only coming home to sleep. One of the reasons we started living together was that I got tired of cleaning up his place every weekend. I was the one who chose and signed the lease for our new apartment. Except for sharing his preferences for location, rent, and size, he didn't do much else. We split the rent and living expenses. He sometimes forgot to pitch in. I took care of the cleaning and laundry. Even though we lived together, we rarely saw each other. The main reason for our official union was my desire to hold on to him, even if it was just a formality. For John, perhaps a wedding ceremony seemed unnecessary. But for me, even if it was just symbolic, I wanted a commemoration, a milestone. At the very least, I suggested we should take some photos and go on a short honeymoon nearby. But all I got in return was,
"Why just take pictures? If you want to go on a trip, why not go with your friends? I ain't got time for that."
Many of my college friends who were in the same seminar would say, "That's not right." But those who knew about his job often replied, "It can't be helped." 3 years have passed. We're now 30. Even though I want to discuss having children, John and I often have opposite schedules, making it hard to find the right moment. All I do is rush between work and household chores every day. I started wondering, why did we even get married? But then one day, John said this out of the blue.
Hey Michelle, didn't you mention wanting to go on a honeymoon before? Yeah, but aren't you too busy? Nah, looks like I might get some decent time off. We can go if you want. Really? I'll set the duration, you choose the rest.
His tone did bother me, but I still noted down the dates he mentioned. A week's time. And it's gonna be summer. So I thought maybe a cooler place would be good, so I considered going to Alaska. I went to the bookstore, picked up a few travel guides, marked places I wanted to visit, and showed them to John.
Hey, can you look at this? I want to go here.
Before I could ask him where he wanted to go, he dismissed me with a wave of his hand.
You choose. I'm fine with anything.
Oh, okay. Something felt off to me then. Maybe it's unfair to expect much from John with his busy daily life. But this is supposed to be our honeymoon. Our very first milestone. I wanted to discuss and decide the destinations with him. Is it wrong for me to hope for that? Even though we've lived together for years, our lives barely intersect. When was the last time we had a meal together? I realized that we hardly ever spoke to each other. Even when I initiate a conversation, he often responds with phrases like, "Do whatever you want and I might let you handle it if you insist." Come to think of it, that's how he's been about chores as well. I remember John, back in college, saying something like this to everyone.
In today's age, couples should both earn and equally share household chores. Splitting chores is just fair. You sure you can handle that? I can cook, at least.
I was quite impressed at the time. He wasn't wrong. Although he mostly eats out, occasionally he seems to cook for himself. I often find dishes I didn't use in the sink. But all other chores are on me. I always end up cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, taking out the trash, everything. Now, John rarely comes home at the same time I do. Once in a blue moon, we get to have dinner together, and it's a relief. But even then, he's constantly glancing at his phone on the table. Once dinner's over, he quickly moves to the living room, seemingly messaging someone on social media. All the while, I'm busy cleaning up. One day, slightly irritated by his indifference, I commented, "You seem awfully busy texting."
Well, unlike you, I have work contacts to keep up with.
He probably wasn't wrong. By the way, he often leaves his smartphone unattended. Like when he's taking a bath or napping on the living room couch. It was by pure chance that I peeked into it. He was messaging a woman.
Who is this person?
At that moment, I shoved my smartphone screen in front of a groggy, just awakened John. The name on the screen read Anna Johnson. Multiple messages from John's side lined up, reading things like "How've you been?" and "You okay since then?"
Who? Oh, she's related to the case I'm currently working on. Is there a problem? You're texting someone related to the case every single day? Well, if I have questions, I've got to show some sincerity, right? But doesn't she seem annoyed by it? You have a problem with how I do my job?
I couldn't really argue when he brought up work.
But decide soon where we're going. I might not be back until the last minute because of the case I'm investigating. Pack our bags, will you?
Yes, that had just happened recently. And finally, the day of our trip arrived. John, who said he might not make it home in time, surprisingly woke up early and in high spirits. "Then, I'm gonna make breakfast," he said, placing a plate of toast, bacon and eggs, and a salad in front of me. I became suspicious when he also set down a pot of coffee, as it was so unlike him.
What's with that look? When I decide to do something, I do it.
Sure, it was just store-bought potato salad, undercooked bacon, and instant soup, but there was no need to make it seem so special. I kept those thoughts to myself and quietly ate.
Here, your luggage. Thanks, looks like you packed it well. Aren't you gonna check inside? I'll check later. If you say so.
We headed straight for the airport. By the way, our destination written on the tickets was Alaska. We had plans to travel around different parts of the state. We took the tram to the domestic terminal and headed for the boarding gate. As we were approaching, John suddenly stopped in his tracks.
Hey, have your boarding pass ready? I can get it out quickly.
As I began to pull out the ticket holder, he snatched the tickets from me, saying, "What a waste to travel with you. I should go with someone else." With that, he ran towards the boarding gate. There was a woman standing ahead. That's Anna Johnson. He had a picture in his smartphone. That's definitely her. I caught a glimpse of that, smirked discreetly, and took out my own smartphone.
Well, shall we head out as planned?
A few hours later, I was at the terminal building of an airport in Alaska. Headed straight for the domestic exit, right up to the famous pastry shop in the dessert corner on the second floor. I knew John and Anna were at the eat-in space there. I confidently walked in and approached the two of them who were enjoying an airport-exclusive sundae.
Found ya.
John, who had been gazing dreamily at Anna, suddenly paled, a bit of ice cream still on the corner of his mouth, looking at me as if he'd seen a ghost.
Wait. Why are you here, Michelle?
Anna jumped up and threw herself at me.
Michelle, I've been so scared.
I gently rubbed her trembling back, while giving John a stern look.
What do you mean? Why am I here? Do you know how many flights from different airlines land there? I just took the earliest one. Are you really a journalist? Not even knowing something so basic. Ugh. Exactly. How can you not even realize that, John? What kind of journalist are you?
From behind me, a deep male voice slowly approached, making John look even more tense.
Why? Why is the editor here? Let's not make a scene here. Let's step outside.
The man called editor was Mr. Long, the chief editor of my husband's department. When we got married, he and his wife had invited us to dinner as a celebration. At that time, we exchanged numbers just in case. As the charismatic Mr. Long grabbed his arm, John shivered. Anna, walking beside me, intertwined her arm with mine, while John looked on, completely baffled. Every time he tried to get closer to Anna, Mr. Long would firmly hold back John's hand. We pretended not to notice as John clicked his tongue in annoyance.
It's less crowded over here.
We headed towards a special room on the third floor we had reserved earlier. A man already inside stood up and waved at us.
Hey, over here!
John's expression turned to shock and he stopped in his tracks.
Come on, why are you stopping? Wait, Michelle, why is my dad there? Well, you left me behind, so I just invited everyone. Why not make it a family trip? That's right. It's your fault for thinking you could go on a honeymoon with another woman.
Mr. Long started dragging John.
It's okay.
I whispered to Anna, and she nodded.
Sorry for the wait, mother and father-in-law. We've managed to capture John. Capture? Exactly, a man who thinks of going on a honeymoon with another woman should be captured, don't you think? Even you, Mom? And you used Michelle's money for all this, didn't you? Father-in-law?
Yes, it wasn't just the in-laws. My parents were there too. And another man, in a suit with glasses.
So, is this the young lady in question? Who are you? Sorry for the late introduction. I am.
He handed a business card to John.
A lawyer? Why?
In fact, I received a request from both Michelle and Anna here, John said.
Michelle did? Wait, more importantly, Anna, why on earth?
John reached out to her as he said this. However, his hand missed as Anna dodged it.
Stop it. Anna? I'm sorry, Anna. I managed to get her out here with your help, but it seems that was my limit. No, I'm sorry. If this settles everything. Settles?
What are you talking about? You've been following Anna around for a while, haven't you? You're saying I've been stalking her? Is that not the case? It's not. I spoke to Anna about the incident that happened the other day. So after that was over, you kept in touch even though the article was done? For stories like this, you're supposed to keep in touch with the people involved.
Mr. Long slapped John on the head from above.
I apologize, Ms. Johnson. I told him not to publish any more articles about the incident you were involved in. Yes, I thought so. Look at the messages this man has been sending me.
The lawyer handed out printouts of the messages to everyone.
What is this? Thank you for your cooperation. Would you like to grab dinner sometime? And you kept inviting her long after she declined. I mean, it's just common courtesy. I was drawn to your brave attitude. What's this about? She truly was brave. Despite the incident, she tried so hard to recover. John.
The voice of John's father-in-law boomed.
What on earth are you saying? Drawn to her? Ms. Johnson, I won't ask about what happened, but I know you were hurt. Yet, it seems this fool kept reminding you of it when you were trying to forget.
Anna nodded with tears in her eyes. I only cooperated because he promised to write properly about the incident. Yet, he kept coming up with reasons to ask me out afterward. And the volume of messages too. And he knows where I live.
That's right. There's also this.
The lawyer handed out several pictures. They showed John with a camera next to a window of a 2-story apartment complex. It's the apartment I live in.
You were up to this?
Hearing that, Anna shivered again.
I've made up my mind.
I'm gonna report him for stalking.
What are you talking about?
Anna began to speak as if a dam had broken.
Every single day, he asks, "What are you doing? Can we meet tomorrow?" Even though he's heard about the incident, he persists even after I tell him there's nothing more to discuss. But you replied to my texts, didn't you? Who do you think is enjoying this conversation? Exactly. Thanks for today, how've you been? Yeah. You know what's good when you're tired? A massage. I'll come over and give you one sometime. I'm busy now. Stuff like that. And what's with the creepy "are you in the bath" messages?
I chuckled as I flipped through the thick printout.
Yes, I really appreciate everything Michelle did. She advised me to keep records of everything. Oh, come on. It must have been scary, right? To deal with someone spouting nonsense like that. It was terrifying.
Anna shivered.
How could you think from those messages that I was into you? It was just plain creepy. But about our trip, it was a final blow for you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bothered with this terrifying plan. Terrifying plan? You still don't get it?
I sighed deeply.
That was my name on it, right? Huh?
He probably realized it was about the airline ticket. Oh, right, it was. What about it? Mr. Long spoke in a hushed tone.
You know, if that's found, it's a crime. Exactly. And if someone gets caught, it won't be you. It's her.
He gasped. He truly seemed unaware. Mr. Long put his head in his hands. I can't believe how stupid my subordinate has been.
You too? Shut up. You're gonna use this to fly to the Philippines.
With that, Mr. Long shoved the ticket in John's face.
What? Why? There are various matters to investigate over there now. You can refuse if you want, but if you do.
Mr. Long turned to Anna.
Yes. If you decide to stay in the country, I'll report you to the police for stalking. I get it. But I don't have my luggage, my passport. The passport. Here.
It was my turn to hand it over to him.
Oh, right. There's something important. Sign this before you go.
I handed him the divorce papers with my signature.
Divorce papers? Are you abandoning me too?
Oh, what are you saying to the wife who went to such lengths to prevent you from getting a criminal record? I'm the one who runs our home.
I laughed dramatically. But then I changed my expression.
Do you have any idea how much of a proper married life we had in that house? We hardly ever saw each other. Both working full-time, and yet all the housework falls on me. Plus, you haven't been contributing to our shared living expenses or rent recently. Really? I get paid just fine from my job. I know. I've looked into what you've been spending it on. Like those high-end cameras at this apartment. Just sign it.
Seeing my fury, his face turned pale as a ghost. He shakily signed the papers and handed them back.
All right, the rest is up to you.
Sorry for everything, said Mr. Long as he escorted John towards the international flight counter. We chose to settle on the third floor instead of the spacious lounge on the second floor. Why? Because the third floor of this airport is where the international terminal is located. The plan was to easily get him on a flight to Manila. As for what happens to him next, that's none of our business. After that, I moved from the condo I had been living in to a small apartment meant for living alone. The number of rooms decreased, and there's nothing unrelated to me. No more buying groceries for someone who I don't know when they'll be back. How easy house chores are when it's just for myself. I realized just how much unnecessary struggle I've been through while living with John. The moving expenses were covered by my father-in-law. He also settled the living expenses and rent John forgot to pay. My in-laws, lamenting that they raised their son wrong, were such kind folks. About a month later, I got a call from Mr. Long. Apparently, John got caught up in some trouble overseas and got arrested. Was it some kind of crime?
I really don't know. Our editorial department didn't ask him to get involved in any crimes or anything. Just told him to send daily updates on the situation over there. Well, I've heard various stories like he got deceived or got addicted to gambling. Told him if he could get a big scoop, we might let him return.
Seems like John got too ambitious and ruined himself, Mr. Long indirectly implied to me. Since then, I haven't heard any rumors of him coming back.
Michelle, over here.
At the cafe we had arranged to meet, Anna signaled me. I quickly approached her table.
Sorry for the wait. All set? Absolutely. How about you, Michelle? Look.
I showed her the fan merchandise for the concert we were going to. We shared a cheerful smile, had a quick coffee, and then headed for the venue. During the time I was communicating about John's issue, I found out that Anna and I were fans of the same musician and we hit it off. We had promised to attend a concert together once everything was settled. Today was the long-awaited day. After getting married, I had forgotten such joys amidst the conflicting schedules with John. Now, I can spend time just for myself, with friends sharing the same hobby. Oh, I'm truly glad I made that decision back then. This is today's dinner. Pizza and hamburgers are good, right? Huh? What's this? Frozen food again? We've been having frozen food a lot lately. Don't you think it's disrespectful to a man who's been working all day? I'm sorry. I'm just nearing my due date and it's really tough. Enough already. You really don't lift a finger, do you? Must be nice living like that. True, lately, because of my late pregnancy, we've had a lot of frozen meals, but why do I alone have to struggle and push through when my husband doesn't help at all, not just with meals but with chores too? He's still mad. I thought to myself, trying to smoothly change the topic. Hey, I forgot to get the mail from the mailbox. Can you grab it for me? I didn't want to upset him more with the frozen food issue, so I reluctantly got up and headed for the front door. And then, in the next moment, I heard the distinct click of the front door locking behind me.
Hey, what's the big idea?
You take people for granted too much. If you love frozen foods so much, why don't you freeze outside? I didn't have my phone with me. How could I spend all night outside in below freezing temperatures? As I started to panic, a man approached from behind. when I explained my situation to him. I'm a 31-year-old stay-at-home wife. My husband and I got married 3 years ago, and we're still just the two of us living together. My husband, who works at a small business, and I, a stay-at-home wife, weren't exactly rolling in dough. However, we were content with our current lifestyle. Above all, we were overjoyed when we had a baby last month. Every day was a blessing. I'm home. I picked up some deli food from the supermarket today. Thanks. I'm sorry for being such a handful with my morning sickness. It's okay. I'm gonna hop in the shower now. Being pregnant was a first-time experience for me, and everything felt new. I had heard from friends who had been pregnant about the struggles of morning sickness, but mine was much worse than the usual. Not only household chores, but even getting up to go to the bathroom was a struggle when I was lying on the couch. However, my husband was understanding and supported me like a true gentleman. This made me believe that I could get through this tough phase. Many of my friends had husbands who weren't as understanding during pregnancy. Knowing I didn't have that problem was a relief. However, we have my parents' 30th birthday anniversary tomorrow, so we're going to my family's place. I'm sorry, can I maybe skip it? It's just, the 3-hour drive one way might be too much for me right now. I've always been there for you. The least you can do is listen to me once in a while. It's pretty thoughtless of you to consider missing my parents' big day. It's true that I've always been grateful for his parents. I would love to attend if I could. When we announced our pregnancy, they came to celebrate, and even helped with some wedding costs. They've always been kind to us. But, even considering how much I appreciate them, my morning sickness was just too intense to think about attending their 60th celebration. I believe my husband understands that I'm suffering from morning sickness, but he can't truly feel what it's like. So, it seems like he really wants me to attend no matter what. We can visit them another day. Would that be okay? I think your mother-in-law would understand. We're always indebted to my folks. It's plain rude not to go. Plus, I already told them you're fine and gonna come, so don't look too sick in front of them. I get where he's coming from, but he could be a little more considerate about my situation. Stress is the worst enemy during pregnancy. And his parents' place is a 3-hour drive away from here. We'd leave early in the morning and probably return late at night. But if he's already told them we're coming, it's hard for me to back out. And I didn't want to argue further and worsen his mood, so I reluctantly agreed. Thankfully, I had medication to lessen my morning sickness, and I decided to take it before we left the next day. As expected, I felt terrible in the morning, but thanks to the meds, I felt a bit better. I thought, maybe I can get through just this one day. So, we headed to his parents' place. Their house was out in the countryside, and as we got closer, the roads got worse. The bumpy ride made me feel even sicker, and just the thought of taking the same route back home weighed on my mind. But I tried to compose myself before we arrived. The roads were busy being the weekend, and it took about 3.5 hours. But when I finally arrived at his parents' place, I took a few deep breaths to compose myself before entering. It's been a while. Thank you so much for coming. I told James it would be okay if he came by himself, knowing you weren't feeling well. Are you really okay?
I'm fine. Thank you for your concern.
I figured. My mother-in-law, having given birth to James and his brother, understood morning sickness more than I did. She knew the struggles and was concerned about me right from the get-go. If my mother-in-law was saying all that, I felt like I probably didn't need to come in the first place. But since I was already there, complaining to my husband now wouldn't help. Besides, the main focus was on the two people celebrating their 60th birthday, and I tried my best not to draw unnecessary attention. But it's pretty exhausting, both physically and mentally, to be on my guard all day. By the time we left, I think my fatigue was evident. I didn't want to inconvenience my driving husband, so I didn't sleep in the passenger seat, even though I wanted to. Why did you look so bored? Huh? I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. My parents are there. You know you have to be more considerate, right? Yeah. I'm sorry. I do think I looked tired before we left his parents' place. My mother-in-law even said, "Sorry for keeping you up so late, especially being pregnant," when we were leaving. I understand that my husband might be upset about that, but I wish he'd be more considerate of how I'm feeling first. It's not like I complained, and even with the morning sickness, I tried my best all day to not let it show. Usually, if I can't handle the housework, I'd rest. Wouldn't a simple "were you okay?" in the car have been nice? It's like I didn't endure or sacrifice anything. Why can't he understand my feelings more? Such feelings welled up inside me, but I thought anything I'd say to my husband now would just add fuel to the fire. Whether it's morning sickness or whatever, he only seemed to focus on the fact that I looked tired in front of his parents, and seemed oblivious to anything else. Then came a sermon from him, and after it seemed he was satisfied, he went silent. The 2-hour ride home was filled with an indescribable tension. By the time we got home, it was past 10 p.m., and I was completely drained. Of course, having driven such a long distance, he must have been even more tired than I was. But I was at my limit and immediately laid down on the couch. Just when I felt relieved, a wave of sleepiness hit me. I thought, if I fall asleep now, that won't be good. I need to at least change my clothes and get to the bedroom. As I was grappling with these thoughts. Hey! There's no beer in the fridge. What? Didn't you put any in after drinking last night? At least manage that much. I'm gonna take a bath, so go buy some now. What? Now? It's already past 10 p.m., and I've been exhausted all day from morning sickness. Asking me to go out and buy it now. That's just devilish, isn't it? In other words, given how he's been pushing me, I've been feeling that he might not care about me as much as he did when we first got married, but I never imagined it would be to this extent. He was grumpy in the car too. I figured he'd get really mad if I refused, but I'm seriously at my limit. There's no way I'm walking to the convenience store to buy beer at this hour. Come on, that's just not possible. I'm exhausted, and I had a rough day with the morning sickness. I've told you this so many times. To me, that's just a bunch of irrelevant talk. I'm gonna take a bath now, so make sure you get it before I get out. If not, I'm seriously gonna be pissed. With that, my husband, looking at me with cold, accusing eyes, went straight to the bathroom without listening to anything I had to say. The look on my husband's face, glaring at me as if I were some sort of villain, made it clear he was dead serious. After he went to the bath, I let out a frustrated sigh and hit the couch hard with my fist. If I don't go now, I really don't know what'll happen next. This will be my last chore for the night. I'll finish shopping before he gets out of the bath and head straight to bed. With that in mind, I hurried to the convenience store, bought 3 beers, and rushed home. Luckily, my husband, who tends to take long baths, hadn't come out yet. After putting the beers in the fridge, I headed straight for the bedroom. As soon as I changed and lay down, I fell asleep as if I had passed out. I guess I was that tired, and I'm impressed I pushed myself this far. I really want to give myself a pat on the back. My husband, after enjoying his nightly drinks, must have slept in because he didn't wake up until midday the next day. Morning sickness was still bad, but it was somewhat better than the day before. Thinking I should get things done while I can, I managed to finish most of the house chores by mid-morning. As my belly grew larger, every task felt heavier, and the supportive husband I knew at the beginning of my pregnancy was nowhere to be seen. He used to be there for me, but now he just complains. I don't know what changed his attitude, but I've been doing my best every day so he won't complain, and both mentally and physically, I've been exhausted. Fast forward, and I'm now in my final month of pregnancy. Raising the child will surely be a challenge once they're born, but at least this tough pregnancy journey is coming to an end. Thinking that I'll finally meet our beloved baby soon, a sense of excitement was slowly building in my heart, different from the tough days I've been through. Welcome home. You're late, aren't you? Got some work stuff. What's for dinner tonight? Was thinking of having the pizza and burgers I got from Costco the other day.
Seriously?
Frozen food again.
You making fun of me?
I'm pregnant, and doing housework is all I can handle right now. If my husband helped with the regular chores, I could adjust my energy and time for cooking. But right now, it's impossible for me to do everything. He gets super angry if I don't do the chores, even though I have to cut down on cooking time. I wish he'd help out a bit if he's gonna complain. My husband, who's about to become a father soon, doesn't act like one at all. Wondering if this is really gonna work out, I decided to speak my mind because I've been holding back a lot. Look. It's impossible for me to do everything by myself. It'd be nice if you helped. When you have time, you're always out drinking or playing golf. You're hardly ever home. I'm about to give birth, so expecting me to be perfect is just unreasonable.
Are you trying to go against me?
I'm just stating the facts. I figured he'd definitely get mad at me for saying all that. But I was at my breaking point. I spoke my mind without holding back my emotions. After I finished speaking, I calmed down, bracing myself for the lecture I was sure my husband would give me. But shockingly, he just started fiddling with his phone without saying a word. Weird. Why isn't he yelling at me today? Earlier, I couldn't hold back and said something pretty harsh. Normally, my husband would have snapped back at me tenfold. Maybe the mention of being almost due made him realize his responsibility as a soon-to-be father for the first time. Well, anyway, I'm just glad nothing happened, and that night, we had frozen food for dinner. Because he came home late, we didn't finish dinner until around midnight. After taking a bath, it was past 1 a.m. when I was ready for bed. Hey, before you go to bed, can you check the mailbox? Now? At this hour? What's the big deal? It's just a small thing. Was he still upset about me serving frozen food for dinner, I wonder? Well, he hasn't been nagging me as he usually does, so I don't want to push it. And checking the mailbox will only take a minute. Doing as he asked, I went to the gate to check the mailbox. I did just as husband told me, heading to the front gate to check the contents of the mailbox. But there was nothing inside. I wonder what he wanted me to see. It was deep winter, and temperatures were well below freezing at night. Dressed in thin pajamas, I nearly froze as I hurried back towards the house. But, just as I reached for the doorknob, suddenly, there was a click from the inside, and the door was locked.
What on earth? What's going on?
Come on, let me in.
It's below freezing, probably about as cold as inside a freezer, right? You seem to really love those frozen meals, so why not stay out here and freeze with them? What? No, wait! Hey!
It seemed like husband had either gone to bed or was ignoring me. It was 2 a.m, and it would be impossible to stay out in this freezing cold until dawn. Besides, I was only planning to check the mailbox and head right back, so I'm really underdressed. I felt like I might freeze to death. My face and hands were burning from the cold, and my body was shivering uncontrollably. I didn't know what to do. My thoughts were becoming foggy. I repeatedly pressed the doorbell, hoping husband would come to my aid, but there was no response from him. Was this his way of getting back at me for using frozen food? I hoped he'd let me in after a few minutes, so I kept calling out to him from outside. But time just went by, and there was no sign of husband. I was getting so cold that I was running out of energy. How much longer would I have to wait? Just as I was thinking this, I heard footsteps approaching from behind. What happened to you? What? I was taken aback by this unfamiliar man, but he appeared to be a bartender who worked at a nearby bar. Since he usually slept during the day, I'd never run into him before. It seems he closed up shop early that day and was returning home around 2 a.m. when he ran into me. What's going on? At the very least, let me get you something to wear. Though he was a stranger in the neighborhood, his gesture of offering his coat without inviting me into his home felt genuinely gentlemanly. It made me trust him, at least a little. He continued to listen to my story outside my house. Of course, normally I'd never share personal family matters with a stranger, but I was so emotionally overwhelmed at the moment, it wasn't the time to be concerned about that. I borrowed his cell phone and reached out to some folks I knew. I promised to repay him later and decided to spend the night at a business hotel. Once I reached the warm hotel room, a sense of relief washed over me, and I quickly drifted off to sleep. Before I knew it, morning had come. After checking out, I headed home. To my surprise, waiting at the gate were my in-laws. I expressed my gratitude for them coming so quickly after my call last night. But the moment I stepped onto the property, I was left speechless.
What? What on earth are you doing?
There was my husband, freezing, without any clothes on. Even in the morning, the temperature hadn't risen above 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Why wasn't he wearing anything? It made no sense. But what was even stranger was the glaring look my in-laws were giving him. Could it be? Did they do this? As these thoughts ran through my mind and I tried to grasp the situation. That foolish son of ours. I'm truly sorry. We came over right after it happened and disciplined this idiot. Discipline. I knew it. The whole situation was orchestrated by my in-laws. When the bartender helped me out, I immediately borrowed his phone to call my mother-in-law. I was so lucky that mother-in-law picked up quickly and that I remembered mother-in-law number. I honestly told mother-in-law everything that had happened with my husband and the recent incident. And there was another thing. I shared a shocking suspicion with mother-in-law that I had heard from the bartender. Thank you for all you've done. It's the least we could do. And, as you mentioned, the rumors of his affair turned out to be true. We had a spare key to your house, so we came in early this morning and confronted our foolish son. Checked his phone, and there was clear evidence of his affair. I knew it. I felt a pang of pity for my husband, abandoned outside in the cold without any clothes, but the moment I confirmed his infidelity, any sympathy I had for him vanished. I had never considered the possibility of his cheating before. The suspicion arose just yesterday. The bartender told me he had seen my husband downtown with a younger woman. Because of his line of work in an area with lots of nightclubs and bars, he had seen my husband with a young lady a few weeks ago. Before we were married, we used to have barbecues in our backyard quite often, so I believe he recognized us. When I first heard about it, I didn't have any solid proof and I wanted to trust my husband, but if he had found someone new and stopped caring about me and stopped supporting me, especially while I'm pregnant, everything made sense. I had shared all of this with my in-laws over the phone, but to find out it was true, it's just disappointing.
If you're freezing, why don't you ask your beloved girlfriend to warm you up with her body warmth?
No, James looked as pale as a ghost, his lips turning a shade of purple. Considering the in-laws have been here for over 3 hours, he must have been left out in the cold for at least that long. Makes me wonder just how much he suffered. Well, he tried to do the same to me, so he's in no position to complain. He probably can't hold a proper conversation because the cold has numbed his mind. But honestly, I couldn't care less.
I think you know this, but I won't accept this. I'm gonna file for divorce. What?
He already looked pretty miserable from the cold, but at the mention of divorce, his face went even paler. I figured if he was treating me like this and having a good time with his mistress, she must be more important to him. Then again, maybe he's just scared of the potential alimony and child support. Either way, I doubt he ever loved me, and I don't have a shred of love left for him either.
I'm gonna sue your lover for emotional damage too, so you better be ready. Hold on, let's talk. There's nothing to talk about. I'll decide on the alimony and child support. You don't have a choice in this. Know your place.
Father-in-law chimed in with a firm tone, leaving husband speechless. Of course, he probably wants to get inside the house quickly to escape the freezing cold, but I think he's even more devastated about what's to come. But, he's only ever acted selfishly, so this is all a result of his own actions. He's probably gonna regret this for the rest of his life, and I hope he does. With those thoughts in mind, I decided to move back to my parents' place and leave husband for my in-laws to handle. I could tell just by looking at him that he was so frail he might need to go to the hospital. But he tried to do the same thing to me, so I have absolutely no reason to be concerned. After returning to my parents' home, I confessed everything to them. They told me it was okay to stay and raise my child there, for which I couldn't be more grateful. I decided I wanted to focus on giving birth first, so I asked my in-laws to wait until after the birth before confronting my husband. Being close to my due date, about 2 weeks after returning home, I gave birth to a big baby boy, weighing nearly 8 pounds. The moment he was born, he cried out loud, and I was so moved that I shed tears, feeling the reality of becoming a mother. For the next 3 months, I devoted myself to parenting at my parents' place. As I began to get used to life with a baby, I asked my mother-in-law and father-in-law to come visit us near my parents' home. Wow, what a healthy little boy. Congratulations on the birth. I'd always been treated well by my in-laws and, under the condition that husband wouldn't accompany them, I let them hold my son. The two of them, holding my son with smiles on their faces, looked like children themselves. I felt a pang of anger towards husband, thinking about how this should have been a happier celebration. But getting mad now seemed pointless. After spending some quality time with my son, my in-laws shifted the conversation back to my ex-husband and helped finalize discussions about alimony and child support. Thanks to their efforts over the past 3 months, the whole truth about my husband's affair came to light. We consulted a lawyer they knew, and it was decided he'd pay me the standard amount. Of course, I couldn't trust a husband who cheated, so he made a lump sum payment. He took out a loan to cover the alimony, but when it came to 20 years of child support, that was too much for him to handle, even with a loan. My in-laws graciously stepped in to help. With the divorce finalized, he's now just a stranger to me. Ex-husband's gonna pay my in-laws monthly for the child support they covered. From what I heard, it turned out that ex-husband hadn't even told his mistress he was married. She dumped him when she found out, leaving him all alone. He's now living with his parents and giving them 90% of his earnings to repay the debt. The remaining 10% barely covers his food, leaving him with no spending money. I'm not sure how long he'll continue this way, but with no savings and only the passing of time, once he's paid off his debt to his parents, it seems they might kick him out. Even when he's free from this financial hell, it seems he's got nothing but despair ahead of him. Well, he brought this upon himself, so I guess he's getting what he deserves. As for me, I'm living at my parents' house, doing my best to raise my child as a single mom. I'm still figuring out the ropes of parenthood, but my mom's been a great help, especially during those sleepless nights. It's made the whole experience mentally easier and enjoyable. I plan on relying on my parents for a while, and once my son starts elementary school, I think I'll get back to work. Plus, I still keep in touch with my in-laws and plan to visit them with my son a few times a year. While my ex-husband to ruin my life, I've got a precious new beginning with my baby, and I'm determined to lead a happy life from here on out.